Tyreek Hill just got pulled out of his car. Again, this just happened a couple days ago. I don't know when this is going to drop, but by now
he was headed to a football game.
He was going to the game.
Yep.
Okay, he's speeding, wildly speeding.
Sure.
He gets pulled over.
So let me bounce this off of you. So I think when we talk about all the complexities and all the ways that people are different, I don't think any group is a monolith. Like black folks aren't a monolith, white folks aren't a monolith, right?
Yeah.
So when we're like, hey, be competent cross-culturally, I'm like, yes and amen.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes, and you tell me what you think about this, when we're talking about, hey, we don't know about those folks, right? We don't know about those folks being in our communities, which sounds very bad on a superficial level.
It does.
But I think of my buddy Shane Smith, stand-up comedian, and he was telling me about like growing up poor, white trailer trash biker gang.
Yeah.
Biker gang, affiliate, the biker gang he was a part of got connected to one of the bigger biker gangs, right?
Okay.
I think when we're seeing these issues, and we talked about the differences between like, hey, like why is there this proliferation amongst like poor white folks and poor black folks, and it looks the same. It's different in that what's happening in Compton is not going to be the same as what's happening in the Appalachian Mountains, right? But there's similar struggles, different external realities. They look different, but very similar.
Yeah.
And so I think when folks are like, oh man, we don't know about those folks, I don't think they're saying we don't know about X, Y, and Z race. I think what they're saying is like, if the biker gang shows up to your church and they're wearing Hell's Angels gear and they're all white folks, we're going to be looking at them sideways.
For sure.
Who are you?
Right.
What are you up to?
Yep.
Why are you here? Are you guys involved in trafficking? Are you moving dope? What's up?
Right.
Those are reasonable suspicions to have, right? And so I think when people are thinking about this, again, this is why I go like, I don't think there's utility in hyper generalizing people and assuming that all black folks have the same concerns.
No.
Right? Because folks in impoverished areas are going to have different concerns than folks in middle class areas. And I think what tends to happen, even within this conversation, and a lot of what's happening on like the rise of overt racism, is people hyper generalize and they think that like the culture or hip hop or Sexy Red or Ice Spice is like indicative of black culture. And it's like, you guys just don't know enough middle class black people or lower middle class black people or upper middle class black people or wealthy black people to assume that it's all like the culture and this is just black people. And it's like, yo, that is such a hyper generalization. But I feel like that's kind of like, so again, like the person that's growing up and their entire world is within a 5-mile radius and they sometimes go without food and their dad or their granddad or their uncles are all locked up. That's a different reality. And I would say that's not the majority. Like that's still they may be more prevalent in black communities, right? Yep. But that tends to be to me, it seems like a socioeconomic byproduct than it is a racial byproduct.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, but this is what's interesting, Ruslan. When you say racial byproduct, meaning that it is 90% the reason why this is happening is because of some kind of racial implication, or it's a high percentage reason why. Because here's what I think even when I hear all that. And again, this is just the way I think. This is the way I've gone through school. It's the way I read books. Race is still a component of that in some kind of way. We can still look through a racial lens just to see what's there. You're saying don't immediately assume that it's this or that.
Yes.
And I very much agree with that. In fact, the biggest problems that I have with guys like Kendi, who you mentioned earlier, is that he at least writes in a way, which is mostly how I've encountered him, as though he's swinging the pendulum hard to this other extreme and making it sound like it's always racist.
It's always about race.
And it's always about race. Now, again, I think that's an overreaction to people saying it's never about race.
Sure.
I really do. So
Sure.
again, how do you confront that? How do you change that?
Sure.
Some people's strategy is we're just going to swing the pendulum all the way to the other extreme.
Sure.
Okay?
Sure.
And then we look at him and say, well, that's too extreme.
Yeah.
And he says, well, what did you want me to do? How was I going to get them off? Okay. There's always a racial component, though, that's worth looking at or considering or thinking about. And sometimes it's stronger, sometimes it's lighter. There's always... So, Tyreek Hill just got pulled out of his car. Again, this just happened a couple days ago. I don't know when this is going to drop, but by now...
He was headed to a football game.
He was going to the game.
Yep.
Okay, he's speeding, wildly speeding.
Sure.
He gets pulled over. This is on the video cam, right? Again, I guess most people...
went viral.
It went crazy, right?
Yeah.
So, you see what he did? They tell him to put his window down. He doesn't put his window down, and they go and get aggressive and pull him out of the car. Now, immediately, again, this is happening. I always read the comments just to see what people are doing with it. They go to these extremes. This is all racist. This is just not listening to cops, right? Not listening to authority. He's got this past of being a certain kind of way. This is what you do with people who drive nice cars in this area. Again, it's just kind of the rhetoric going back and forth from the extremes. What I want to do as a Christian is be able to look at a situation like that. And again, this is falling on such hard times, the whole both and or bothism, right? People are like scoff at that. And I'm thinking, no, as an alien and a stranger, my own theological moorings and my own biblical understanding often has me in this sort of trying to transcend and get over this thing and be able to see where it's both and. And in this particular case, I look at this and they say this had nothing to do with race. These were Hispanic cops and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, no, there's always a racial component in the sense that this moment is attached to a larger narrative. It's always attached to a larger narrative. And most of my white friends or just people, even some of my black friends who don't want to think this way, that is tied, this particular moment is tied to a larger narrative. Guess what? For the cops, pulling a dude over with a tinted window who rolls his window back up and is mouthing off and has the attitude enough to say no, okay? There's a history, there's a narrative of dudes like that being willing to shoot you as a cop. You know what I'm saying? And so both parties in this situation, again, I'm not trying to get into right or wrong. Like, I'm not even doing that right now. I'm just saying this moment is attached to larger histories, both of which need to be taken seriously in the moment if we're going to find wisdom. And we need to be able to say, dude, when somebody's standing there and there's three guys standing there with guns, that's not the time to let pride get going. Because when you do that, bad things are going to happen to you.
Pride on whose part?
In this case, just for this side of it, Tyreek's side.
Okay.
Don't bang on my window like that. Okay. Again, these dudes, like you should know enough not to get mouthy with three dudes with guns.
Okay.
This is a take, right? On the other hand, the escalation on the guys with authority, which has become so commonplace, not just become, like this has been going on for a long time. It's just not getting caught on video all the time, is a major problem. And it does have a racial component to it. It does have a racial history attached to it. That doesn't mean I'm trying to say these three guys are racist. It still has a racial component. And it has these other components of just being militaristic in their approach, not being able to de-escalate situations. How do we keep letting guys, just get pulled over for speeding and have it turn into this violent, aggressive, dragging somebody out of the car type situation? That is a problem. And it's attached to a larger history. So Christian, like my first step should not be to take sides in a moment like this, but it really should be able to step back if I have cross-cultural competency. Again, just talking about the racial part of this. Do I know enough of the history of black folks or just non-white Americans' overall experience? Doesn't mean it's happened to everyone. Doesn't mean it's happening all the time. Do I know enough about the history to know that this is attached to some really egregious stuff? And that every time a dude gets pulled over, a non-white person gets pulled over, it's attached to centuries of abuse with people that have authority over him. And this is what I'm saying, Ruslan. Most of the people I interact with, they don't have access to that history in their mind. They don't know it. They don't know it. It's just another moment, another isolated moment that's not attached to anything else. And I think that's a huge problem. When, this is going to sound kind of random too, but let me just go here for a second. When Ahmaud Arbery got shot, this is the one that I come to all the time. Horrible video, right? Just grievous, man, watching it, just terrible. In the morning, I had several black friends, a couple female friends that called and were crying. They were very upset. They were upset about what it meant for them. This was on the back of a bunch of those situations. So they were kind of on the back end of all the feelings that came with all that, seeing it, feeling it in their body. They were moved, bothered. So I'm having that conversation with them. I go to lunch a couple days later with a white friend of mine, and I bring it up. He doesn't even know it happened. He heard a little something about it, and I just showed the video a little bit. He's like, "Oh yeah, I heard about that. Like I heard he was stealing something in the house or something. Like that's it. Nothing, no emotion, nothing." This is what I do with that. Like, how can there be such a huge gap between the experience of my black female friends and this white dude who, again, is he racist? I'm not even trying to figure that out. I just think he's ethnically indifferent. Mm-hmm. He's been able to slide out from under having to pay attention to any of these racial trauma moments in our society across the entirety of his life. And he's in his 40s and still doesn't have to feel anything about it. Mm-hmm. I want to close that gap in the church. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to keep getting pulled out to all these extreme examples and what about this is and what about that. So it's like, yeah, I don't need to run to the end of the tracks with these extremes. I need you to feel something when there's a video, though, of any color man being shot.
Sure.
But especially, like, can you feel how this is attached to a bigger history? And
absolutely.
The answer is no, Ruslan. Again, where I'm from, the answer is no, way too much. It may not be the same. Like, do you feel, let me ask you this. I wanted to ask you this anyway. So yes, it's very racially diverse out here. Mm-hmm. Do you think, though, that people have racial intelligence? And what I mean by that is, let's, again, just talk maybe white, black. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like the white people that live out here on the West Coast, they do know the history of black trauma in this culture? I don't mean just like they've heard of it, but like they've taken classes where you like have to really understand the situations that have actually happened. Like they've studied civil rights. They've studied these things. Like, is that in the school system out here in a way that you feel like people are getting educated about our racial history? Or is it just a little something here and there? And maybe you don't know that because you haven't been to school in a long time.
I haven't been to school in a long time. Right. I will say, when I was in college, we had an amazing sociology department.
Where'd you go to college?
Went to Maricosta out here. So Maricosta is very, not to sidetrack because I want to come back to the Tyreek thing. Maricosta is a very interesting college in that there's a college in Oceanside. Oceanside is probably like the last blue-collar town, but what they did strategically is they placed a campus in Rancho Santa Fe, the most affluent part of Southern California, arguably one of the most rich places to live on the West Coast.
Mixed or mostly white folks?
This is mostly white folks. Yep. Rancho Santa Fe is like the cream of the creme of it's really nice. Okay. So they planted a campus there, and because the property taxes from that campus are so high, the main campus in Oceanside is probably the best resource community college in the state.
Okay.
So my teachers at Maricosta were making like way more money than at Cal State San Marcos. The education at Maricosta was way better than at Cal State San Marcos because you could attract talent because your base level pay is so crazy. So Maricosta is very shrewd in what they planting that campus down. It's a little small micro campus, but those property taxes end up funding the school really well. So most folks who come out here and go to Maricosta actually get a really good education at a community level college.
Okay.
Having said that, yes, we had a great sociology program. I would say my brother, my sister, who all grew up in Del Mar, who all went to these sorts of schools, definitely are aware of the history that black folks have experienced here. Now, I can't speak on behalf of all white people, but most white people have black friends out here and are interacting with people. Now, again, how educated they are. But I think there is a consensus that, like, yeah, man, like, black folks have a pretty crappy history with police in America.
Okay.
And the macro idea that bad policing is bad and hurts everyone.
It plays everywhere.
It hurts people everywhere.
Yep.
Including white people.
Yep.
Who are perhaps not as at risk of having bad encounters, but because they're a higher population, they're going to be more likely, often not per capita, but in the gross numbers, are going to be more likely to die at the hands of police.
Yeah.
Right. That is true.
That's true.
So yes, most folks, I think from my standpoint, are like, hey man, like, cops can't do anything and get away with it, and we just act like it's cool. That's not right. Now, what happens is, and I just want to end this thought, is I don't understand, like, I can't comprehend how someone would be like, yeah, let the cops do their job. Like, conservatives take the L in acknowledging that the justice system can be used to have a witch hunt against Trump with bad charges that weren't felonies until they made them felonies to charge, and all that.
Yeah.
And all that could be true.
Yeah.
But you don't think that that law enforcement could misbehave, and oftentimes this can negatively affect black people, because oftentimes black people are more likely to come in contact with police because they tend to be, on the lower socioeconomic status. Like, you don't think that's a possibility. And so I think when this sort of stuff happens, I'm happy that it's starting to get charged more quickly.
Me too.
The situation with Sonia, I can't remember her last name.
Yeah.
That was right away. That dude got charged with murder right away, rightfully so.
Yeah.
But there was another situation in Florida that I'm sure you heard about where there was a cop. They had someone in custody over, I'm going to say, a domestic dispute.
Yep.
Dude's in the back of the police car. The cop is walking past. An acorn drops, hits the car, and he thinks he's under fire, grabs down, thinks he's shot. This is all on video. You guys go look at this. And is firing at the car where there's someone who is in handcuffs and shooting at the car while thinking he's hit. He was neither hit. There was no one shooting at him. It was literally an acorn that fell from a tree. He spazzes out. That gentleman should have been charged.
Yep.
That gentleman, he is a menace to society. If you are so spooked that an acorn...
Yep.
Everyone, white, black, rich, poor, should be like, hey, we got to get these guys off the street. Now, I say all that to say, while I think most cops are trying to do a good job, I think most of them are trying to do a good job, and I think most of them have a really hard job.
So do I.
And they're extremely probably overworked. A lot of overtime. It's a tough position to be in. So I think everyone should be able to agree that bad policing is bad, and we don't want bad police out here. So instead of trying to defund the police, which by the way, statistically, I don't know if you read Sho Baraka's book, but he proved statistically that black folks don't even want to defund the police, right? Statistically, we should be wanting to fund the police better to get better training, right? In California, you need more hours to become a hairdresser, to get licensed as a hairdresser and a hairstylist than you do to become a police officer. There's something crazy about that. So this is what I'm saying. So I think we could all agree and be like, yes and amen, better or we should,
including because we don't,
including my white brothers and sisters, should all be able to. Again, this is where the conservatives take an L. We should all be able to agree on that without jumping out the window and saying stuff like, "Well, all police officers have implicit bias against black people, and they're all racist, and it's not just a couple of bad apples. A couple of bad apples rottens the entire batch." Right? And again, that's the extreme people go to. So there's a tension that we live in, and then when we see a situation like Tyreek Hill, who's in Florida, who is a man of privilege, right? Big time. In a luxury car, multimillionaire, speeding. It said he went from 0 to 60 in less than 3 seconds. That does have a racial component, because I'm sure from his vantage point, there's perhaps a hostility towards police officers. Perhaps he understands some of that. From the police officer standpoint, they're like, yo, this dude is a menace. What is he doing? You got to chill, bro.
Yeah.
And then the escalation of force, right? And so it's like, yeah, I get the tension, but I think at the same time, we should all want good policing, and we should all want to make their job easier.
Yep.
You as a reasonable citizen shouldn't be out here. I was at the Oceanside Harbor, and these guys were about to get into a fight. Mexican guys, black guys, police pull up. They're trying to de-escalate the situation. These dudes, Samoan dude, black dude, just start talking crazy to these police officers.
Okay.
And I'm like, bro.
Yeah, don't do that.
These guys got firearms.
Yeah, don't do that.
I don't think you have firearms on you. This is going to end really badly. And I just see this anger. And so it literally goes from the police pulling up to hey, you guys can't park here. We heard there was a dispute. We're going to give you a ticket. And give me the effing ticket, man. You guys are, and just cussing out. And I'm like, man, this is a really interesting time where you have these sort of encounters. And so it's again, I'm just gonna take the position of we should we respect the authorities who are here to suppress evil and here to create order, while at the same time acknowledging that sometimes those who create order and have the sword have abused it.
Yeah.
And black people have been negatively impacted by that. Hey, if you want to see the extended version of this podcast, completely unedited, consider partnering with us in our online community for as little as $5 a month. In exchange, you get access to these podcasts as we stream them live before anyone else gets to see them. You get access to the replay of our daily after party streams, access to our private Discord server, access to discount codes, and so much more. So help us continue contextualizing the gospel through media, podcasting, and YouTube, and partner with us for as little as $5 a month. Also, be sure to follow us on the Spotify podcast app, on Facebook, and on Instagram. We're constantly posting content there that I think you'll find extremely valuable. All right? I'll see you over there. Peace.